So let's take a look at two things: how aperture will affect your photo and how aperture priority mode works. Okay, so let's take a look at my current settings here. I have my shutter speed set at 1250, I have my aperture at 1.4, and I have my ISO set at 100. What I'm going to do is take a photo of these settings here that I have, and this is going to be a photo with a very large aperture, so a small f-stop here of 1.4. And what we're going to notice is two things. The aperture is going to affect the overall brightness or the exposure of the image, and also it's going to determine our depth of field, or looking at what's in focus and how much of the photo is going to be in focus, as opposed to having a blurry background. Now what I want you to do is watch as I change my exposure here. What I'm doing is increasing my f-stop. So I'm going to continue to take this up, and you'll notice the photo is getting darker and darker and darker. And if we can go all the way up to f10, and at this point I'm going to want to lower my shutter speed because we made this very dark. So I can lower my shutter speed here, and I'm going to also increase my ISO just so that this image is properly exposed for. And what I'll do is I'll take this photo and we'll take a look at the difference between these two photos that I took. So first off, we have the first image that our f-stop was set at 1.4. And what I want you to notice is the background is very blurred out. You don't see much detail in what's outside the window. Now this is opposed to our f10 image here, where we can see you have a lot more detail in this building outside. You can see kind of some of the junk laying around on the outside of it. And so we have two different aperture settings here. We're keeping the photo somewhat exposed similarly by changing other settings, but what we have is the aperture directly impacting the depth of field of this image. Now if we switch to aperture priority mode, may it be AV on your camera settings, your camera is going to let you control the aperture and ISO while it automatically adjusts the shutter speed for you. However, just because your camera is adjusting settings for you doesn't mean you don't have to worry about the shutter speed. So let me demonstrate how this may work. So if we have our settings here, we have our aperture set at 1.4 and we have the ISO at 100. Now if we click the shutter button here, we're going to see that the shutter speed is going to be at 1000. Now watch what happens when I change my aperture here. I'm going to take it all the way up to f16. So let's say, for example, we love the shot, but we want more in focus in the background. We want to see what's outside the window as well. So I'm going to adjust my aperture setting here all the way up to f16. Now if I click the shutter button now, you're going to see that my shutter speed is going to be around 8, which is very slow. That's 1/8 of a second for that shutter. So with that shutter speed, we look at this and it looks okay in the back of the camera. I don't see anything wrong with the settings here because the camera is keeping that exposure for us. If you notice, when I was adjusting the aperture here, the exposure doesn't change like it did in manual mode. So all we're doing in aperture priority mode is impacting how much of the image we have in focus. And so this can be very challenging if you go to take this image here, and actually got a little brighter outside, so it went up to 10. Our shutter speed's at 10. So if we take this shot, and as I'm on a tripod here, it's not a large deal, but let's say there was some movement here, and I take this image, and it's going to come out very blurry. So always be aware of your shutter speed when you're in aperture priority mode. And if your shutter speed is too low, you can always do one of two things. You can reduce or lower your f-stop, and that will take your shutter speed higher. Or what you could do is adjust your ISO setting and increase your ISO, and that will also increase your shutter speed.